Yeah. Let's just wait a few minutes more, and then we can introduce each other, introduce ourselves. I should tell you that in this class, I'm going to have two former students from a previous life of mine, Richard Mayman, who some of you have met before, and then Mike Roman, who's with us now, who claims that he had a philosophy course with me many years ago.
Yeah, I forgot what year it was, Forrest. I'm thinking maybe 68 or 69 because I
Yeah,
graduated from Lake Forest in 71 and I
71.
start yeah, 71. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was probably 68
hmm
from what you said.
I did look up some old yearbooks and your picture is in there a couple of times and
Oh,
you haven't aged at all, Forrest. You look exactly the same.
oh, what a sweetheart. Are you hoping for a good grade in this
Yeah,
course?
well, I can't bring you an apple in Isle of Man.
Dodie, can we hear your voice? No, you're muted. You have to unmute. You find the mute button down in the lower left-hand corner. It should be.
I see that. Okay,
There
you
you go. Yeah,
Okay.
there you got it.
All right.
Okay, well, why don't we start introducing ourselves? Let's go. The order I have starts with Ron Kopecki. I don't know if I have the accent right.
Uh, that's good enough for American expression. So it's Kopicki, actually. It's a Polish name.
Okay.
Anyway, I just by way of background, this is sort of a renaissance for me. I love ideas. I love Forrest. I love the way that Forrest delivers them. I've taken other courses from him. I'm enthusiastic about participating in this one. I believe the Greek poets have a lot to teach us, and I'm avid to learn.
Okay, lovely. Holly?
I am Holly Wright. I took one of Forrest Plato courses, and I so enjoyed the conversation, his presentation, and the conversation of the group that seems to be his followers. And so I'm glad to be here for this class.
Oh, good, good. Holly is a prolific letter writer to our local newspaper.
Yeah,
And
I'm
good,
in retirement. Thank you. Okay.
yeah, being very articulate, I should say.
Oh,
Mike
thank you.
Roman.
Well, as I mentioned, I haven't had a class with Forrest for some time, but I perchance I was at a lunch at some friends, and I met Forrest. My wife is in a garden club with his wife, and so this I had met Forrest before, but when I was talking to his wife in the kitchen, said, "Well, yeah, my husband used to teach in a liberal arts college in the Midwest," and I kind of go, "Oh, that's a coincidence. I went to a liberal college in the Midwest," and then I go, "Where was it?" She goes, "Lake Forest," and I go, "Well, gee, I went to a college in Lake Forest," and we pieced together the time frame, and then I went out and talked to Forrest about it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to taking the class. I retired July the 1st. I'm a scientist. I used to work for the University of Maryland lab down in Horn Point. So I'm eager to expand my horizons about Greek tragedy.
But you did tell me that you had a good liberal arts education.
I did. Yeah, thanks. In part to
Okay.
you.
Okay, Mike Donahue.
Yeah, I'm pleasure to have to be with you. I live up in Wickford, Rhode Island. Some of you may know, and I'm sure many of you know Charlie Yonkers. Charlie was my Peace Corps director in West Africa from 73 to 76 and has remained a wonderful friend. I've sat in on a couple of Charlie's classes in the Chesapeake Forum in the last couple of years, including the one Forrest mentioned, and really enjoyed that. So when the catalog came out in there was one from Charlie and there was one from Forrest in there. I said I'll run a little bit of a diverse course this time and take one from Forrest. And I told Charlie I wasn't being disloyal to him. I just figured I'd sit down with Forrest. And I had breakfast with Forrest one time a year ago and really enjoyed the conversation. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to this discussion.
So you're part of the diversity movement. Where are you located right now?
I'm at home. I'm still working part-time. I work out of my home. I'm in my home office, and Wickford is on the west side of Narragansett Bay, about 20 miles south of Providence. And for those who've been to Newport, Rhode Island, we're two bridges across from Newport.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Lee is a familiar face.
Yes, I happen to be Forrest's older brother, and I'm trying to learn from him the techniques of great discussion leading, which he's a super guy at doing. I enjoyed doing that also, and incorporated great books readings into my economics teaching, and it made it much more enjoyable for me and for beneficial for my students as well.
Okay.
So here
And
I
you-
am again.
Yeah, again. And he's my older brother. If you think I'm old, think of how old Lee is. Lucy, how about you?
Hi, I am from Easton. Well, I've been in Easton for almost 6 years now. Moved from Baltimore, Maryland, so not too far away from home. But I like to call this home now. I've taken 2 other classes with Forrest, and I have enjoyed the discussions and the conversation after the stories more than the stories themselves, in a way, because they're so hard to read. I don't have any background in Greek history or any of that. I do have a liberal arts background, per se, but I think these stories are fascinating. And when I finish trying to get through one of them, because they're hard to read and complicated, I feel like I know these characters, that they're living in the life I'm in right now somehow. So that makes it interesting. So I'm just here for fun.
Good. Okay. Mike, are you able to speak?
Yeah, I'm Mike Davis. I'm a veteran of Forrest's classes. I think I've taken every one of them since I discovered you online. Well, actually discovered you at a mailbox. Forrest and I are neighbors in Easton. I've lived here for about 3 or 4 years, and in another life, I've had lots of other lives. I was taught philosophy at Washington College, which is a small liberal arts college here in the Eastern Shore. And I studied philosophy at the University of Maryland and graduate work at the University of Nebraska. Then I ended up working for the Navy, buying submarines and doing large data implementation of large databases before I retired. And then I discovered Forrest as a neighbor and that he offers philosophy courses. But I have to say that when in studying philosophy, I didn't study any of the Greek dramas, none of them. So this is all kind of new to me and fascinating. So usually I talk too much during these classes, but I don't think I'll be doing that today. But I really enjoy the discussion of these classes, and Forrest really brings out good words from people.
Yeah. So all these words of praise, I hope that you're not going to be disappointed. Dodie?
Yeah, hi. Well, I'm a Forrest follower like many of you. I don't think I've taken every one of your courses, but I try. I'm also on the board of Chesapeake Forum, and my degrees are all in adult education. I never took philosophy or studied the Greek drama, so this is like continuing ed for me.
Okay, thank you. And Lance?
Yes, I too am a veteran of Forest, and I feel very much enriched by having been that veteran. I have in my life was a practicing attorney in the Baltimore, Maryland area, and I was trying to become a philosophy minor in college, which unfortunately at that point in time, ending the war in Vietnam seemed more important to me than the Peloponnesian Wars. So I'm afraid I didn't do all the reading I was supposed to and never did get that minor, but I think I'm catching up now. And by the time I'm 80, maybe I can be a minor in philosophy if I keep hanging by forests.
All right.
Say, Forrest, can you refocus the camera? We're seeing only the lower half of your face.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I'm trying. How's that?
Better.
That's good.
Maybe you
okay.
could center it a little more.
All right. It looked good.
There.
There. That's
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
much better. We like to
I've
lip
got
read.
I've got to stick something behind here.
That's what I've been doing all my life, offering Forrest advice.
Yeah, that's right.
It never ends.
Yeah. Started when I was 6 months old, I think. Okay, well, why don't we start off with questions that you have, and I'll keep mine in reserve, as it were. Lucy, you had some puzzlement. You said, do you want to ask a question for all of us to wrestle with?
I don't know if I can think of a specific question, except for that it was a lot. Who sent the movie from 1957? Was that you, Lance?
That was Lance.
Oh.
Guilty.
Yeah, that was hard to follow, but it helped to explain some things for me. It's hard to believe that nobody knew what was going on in the story. It's so hard. It's hard to believe that, but that's why it's a myth or whatever it is, I guess.
Yeah.
That all these all the irony and all the little things. So there's a million little things that happened that made this story unfold. Like, the baby being left in the tree, and the person that left him there didn't know whose baby it was. How could that be?
Yeah.
All those little things, but that's just myth.
Yeah.
And then the ending. I don't know if I come up with any big question other than, aren't there so many people right now that we know, especially when you think of in political terms, who don't know what they don't know, and it's right in front of them.
Wow. Oh, that's a lovely thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember that one rule that we have, we can kind of hint at things the way
Yes.
Lucy did, but we're not going to talk politics.
Yeah. Got it.
Except for ancient Greek politics.
Well, then, you can even apply that to yourself. The dark side of all of us is really hidden away, isn't it?
Yeah. With the ending, it's very interesting. Count no person happy until he or she is dead. I put in the feminine there, but that's a famous quotation. Actually, I was kind of surprised that Emily didn't refer us to that. But in Herodotus's history, he tells the story of Creon, who rose to great power and then lost it all. And Herodotus says that Creon realized what had happened to him, and he said, "Count no man happy until he is dead." We never know what's around the corner from us.
Yikes.
Holly? Oh,
Yeah, in terms of being aware of what's going on and it being unrealistic for all those people not to be aware, one of the things I really enjoyed was knowing what was going to occur and waiting for that moment of realization on the part of Oedipus.
yeah.
And I found that the plot moved along really quickly. It was quite, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it really takes him a long time to
Mhm.
come to get to have full awareness, doesn't it?
Yeah, because he
Yeah.
doesn't want to. I mean, ultimately, I think he knows, halfway through, he has enough information to draw some conclusions, but he really does not want it to be true. So maybe that's a lesson too.
I like the fractiousness in perspective and expectation that was manifested between a rational framework for the way in which things work out logically, step by step, based on facts, and another that was more religious, that depended on prophecies and the intervention of the gods. And there was this dynamic that was put into the heads and the voices of the principals. And these two ideologies, I think, to the extent that they were explored in this play, represented a kind of tipping point in Athenian culture, a kind of way station between a more traditional, what shall I say, spiritual and God-centered and more rational and more reasonable approach. And you saw that interplay in quite a few of the scenes. And in fact, the balance gradually tips, ultimately, I must say, in favor of a more spiritual and theocratic kind of notion of how the world works and who controls it, and the basis on which we participate in spite of our pridefulness as pawns as opposed to queens or kings.
Do you agree with Ron's analysis that this that kind of somehow religion is behind all of this? That is the Athenian religion, the myths.
I agree with it. I think, and I found, well, first of all, I say I like the play. I thought he did a good job. It was like a murder mystery. Read murder mystery. So he played out the discoveries over the course of the play that, even though I knew what was going to happen, I thought it was interesting. But the one point of confusion that I was left with is the role of free will or the fates. I mean, on the one hand, you can look back and say Oedipus is not a bad person because everything that happened to him, Apollo set up. And then you have other situations in the play where they're praying to Apollo to change things. So I wasn't quite sure, once Apollo makes up his mind that you're going to do all this stuff, what is the role of prayer at that point? It just, I don't have an answer for it at all, but it was a religious view somewhere tied into that, the gods running your life and at the same time you wanting to appeal to them.
Mike,
my thought on that is I'm wondering, just, I don't know that their gods was like our one God who was supreme and could make anything and everything happen. My reading of it was they considered them some type of superhumans, had flaws, and I'm not sure. And I think my own thinking on this was that Oedipus, and I know there's a lot of discussion as whether it's did he have tragic flaw? Didn't he have a tragic flaw? Aside from the complex, which he obviously had, I think he could have used some anger management. Because if he hadn't have gone crazy and started killing everybody at the crossroads, he'd have been just fine. So you got to You got to keep yourself under control sometimes. And my father always used to say, the gods destroy first who they make angry. And I looked to see where that was derived from. I thought it was actually my father, but it turns out it was Sophocles, apparently, in Antigone, who whence that particular bromide comes.
Mike, you wanted to say something, darling? Oh, can't hear you.
Oh. No, I just said what I said. That's what.
I was calling Mike Roman.
Because you got two mics here, right?
Yeah, I read the play and made my own conclusions, and then I read the notes by Emily Wilson and her interpretation. And her interpretation was a bit of that he was punished for a certain amount of hubris. He kind of came in and he was cocky and he did all that stuff, and then this kind of caught up with him, which certainly is a very common theme in Greek mythology, where if you get a little too high on your horse, the gods will take care of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that his demise does not have to do with his flaws in particular.
Does not have to do with what? I'm sorry. Could
with
you
his
say
flaws. So I think his flaw was kind of hubris, but his downfall having to do with, killing his father, sleeping with his mother, kind of independent of that. So it's not kind of a fatal flaw that does him in.
But Lance said it wasn't simply pride, but as Lance suggested that Oedipus could really use some anger
management.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a lot of anger, not only killing that man in the road, but then he kills them all.
He killed them all.
And then he gets angry.
Yeah.
Gets angry with the priest because he doesn't like what the priest says, and then he gets angry with Creon, who's in this play a very, very good guy.
he is indeed?
Mm.
There's also a huge amount of irony. I mean, the discourses underscore the outcomes that are manifested later on. And sometimes you have people pronouncing on the fate of other people, whereas we, the audience, understand they're talking about their own fate and what is about to happen. So you have a lot of this juxtaposition and misdelegation of responsibility and of likely outcomes and of relationship with the gods. One case in point, I think, that's notable is the inversion of the relationship between Creon and Oedipus early on.
Mm.
Its ultimate reversal and the inverse of the dependencies that exist in the first sections are completely opposite by the end, where Oedipus is pleading with Creon for he surrenders his fate. He said, put me away or put me to death. Please relieve my pain. And he's subordinate, and he's attentive and responsive to someone else's authority. Whereas at the front end, he's threatening Creon with banishment, with his own death, etc. But there are a lot of little twists and turns like that through the play. It's very artful. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed was discovering probably the prototype for a lot of theatrical postures of hubris, of overreach, of commentary by the chorus, and the chorus's third eye observation of events and their interpretation of those events. There are a lot of things that are done for the first time in this play that resonate in Shakespeare and in the more modern theater that we're all probably more familiar with. It's wonderfully carried out. It's executed sublimely. I mean, I really enjoyed seeing these things emerge, and not just one or two, but there were dozens and dozens of these tricks of the eye, tricks of the theatrical art that were pulled off.
Okay, let's try, though, to figure out some of the themes that you all have brought up. The whole business of the role that the gods play, for instance, is that view is there a common view to all from all of the characters? Blah, 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 blah. I'm not speaking very clearly because my thoughts are going ahead of my mouth. But I wonder if we are presented by Sophocles with a variety of viewpoints about the gods and about fate and so on.
I've been reading the other translation by Emily Wilson about the Iliad. It came out a few months ago, and I was intimidated from college, etc. I was intimidated by reading Greek literature, the stuff that we're talking about right now. I just wasn't ready for it. And so in the last couple of years, having picked up a few works by Madeline Miller, a couple of the novels by Madeline Miller, which included Song of Achilles and Circe, and now getting involved with the Iliad, having watched Madeline Miller make a reference to Emily Wilson, the translator, on a podcast I listened to. This really adds to it. And I thought that when you raised that question, Forrest, that I did not get the sense in the Sophocles, in the Oedipus period, that it was as determinate, that the work of the gods was determinate, as it seemed to me reading Emily Wilson's translation of the Iliad. The Iliad, it seemed to be the gods directed everything, the way she translated it. In this case, it just seemed to be more of an influence, but not directing so much as directing the action.
Can you just clarify that? It's an influence, but not an influence.
When reading the Iliad, and again, first time in 50 years of making an attempt at something like that, and it just seemed to me that the way the story goes, the gods are driving everything. Anything that pops up in the course of the battle, etc. It's the Ares, or it's one of the other, the Apollo, or somebody else, or the different gods of the Hera, etc. Were really driving the action, were controlling the action. Whereas in this book, it seemed that the gods were in Sophocles. It seems that the gods were influencing the action, but not as forcefully directing it as I read it. I could be wrong.
Lucy?
Well, I think there is a lot going on with the gods. There's mention of fate. There's mention of oracles and prophets and gods, kind of interchangeably. I'm not sure if I know the difference between all of them, except for that Apollo's the big one. I always thought, before I knew anything about Oedipus Rex, I always thought that this was a story about a man who fell in love with his mother. And there's nothing about love in this myth that I read. A mother's love, maybe, but there wasn't anything about that. And so it was just really wonderful to read this and understand it better. I love the part about and this doesn't have to do with the gods, or maybe it does, that there was so much that he didn't see, and the blind priest, or whether he was a priest or a prophet, who told him it was you that killed the king. Mm-hmm. And he didn't see that, and just that the irony of all of that was just perfect. But I don't see that there's a lot of theocracy in terms of how we view religion in our times. To me, it's completely different. Yeah. It's all about the God. I think I have to say, for me, it was all about the gods and the prophets and the oracles and the people that can see ahead. And like there was some mention of in some review I read of this, where when you're born, there are these three threads that come together to determine your life.
Right.
And then I don't know how to explain that, but that sure did happen to Oedipus. I think he was destined for this, the tragedies of his life.
It is interesting how the phrase Oedipus complex, has been popularized, which really, as Lucy said, is not supported by the play. I mean, there was no romanticism or coveting your mother whatsoever, really, at least in this translation.
Right. Yeah. In fact, one might argue that the whole notion of romantic love is just foreign to the Greeks. And some people argue that it doesn't really creep into Western culture until the troubadours in the late Middle Ages. Insofar as there is, quote, romantic love, it's more like lust for the Greeks, and it's an unpleasant feeling. It's not a good thing to be in love, because it takes away your thinking, as we all know.
I think in this play, though, that I'm drawing a blank here. Oedipus's wife and his mother, she had much more feeling for him. She was much more careful about his welfare and indeed his fate than he was about her. I mean, there was an asymmetry between those two sets of relationships. Now, if that wasn't love, it was maybe the Greek equivalent. It was certainly not much, shall I say, sexual in any way. It had to do with thoughtfulness and carefulness and genuine concern. I think even her suicide was caused to some extent, not just by the external blasphemy, but by the internal requirement of this relationship of her son and her husband's ultimate failure and his desperation.
Well, you could argue everybody got what they deserved, and no one's mentioned the I guess the Roman Greek practice of exposure, where you dispose of a baby by binding it and leaving it out in the open to almost certainly perish.
Right.
So I was telling that to somebody, they said that's like an Arkansas abortion, but I mean, really a barbaric practice that, and if Jocasta was part and parcel of that, ultimately she probably got what she deserved. Same thing with his dad.
But Emily Wilson says that seems to have been accepted practice in that period of time amongst the Greeks. That I don't know if Aristotle maybe says someplace that that babies were not considered human beings until they were 2 years old. So someplace that idea floats around, and of course, some people now go to the other extreme, as it were. But certainly, it's not presented as some terrible thing to do.
And other societies practice infanticide like that. I mean, I did some work in Tahiti, and a lot of island cultures. There was a mountain where they brought up infants and tossed them over, usually female infants, because the island was finite. And they don't practice that anymore. But as I looked into it, other cultures do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you can justify it just because it was a prevalent practice at the time. We had slavery in America for a long time, but I don't know that anybody's going to stand here and say, "No, it's all right."
Yeah,
I don't think it was okay to do that personally.
Yeah.
No, I'm not condoning it.
Nobody
it
does.
certainly seems untoward, to put it mildly, to our culture. But apparently not in Greek culture, and as Mike Rubin says, in a lot of other cultures, even today. I'd like to come back to think some more about Oedipus. Where do you think Oedipus stands with respect to all of this theology and the power of the gods and so on? Do we get some clues about what his interpretation is?
Well, he leaves his first parents to go elsewhere because he understands, what the curse might be. So he's certainly intimidated by what their will might be that would be bad for him.
Mm-hmm. And he accepts that's the prediction, and
Yeah.
he's going to try to avoid that prediction.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be a good person throughout. I think he wants to be upright and upstanding, a good person, and help people. I think that you hear that throughout.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the play, I think when he's remembering and re-representing his confrontation with the Sphinx, he's celebrating his own heroic capacity to overcome extraterritorial and even extraterrestrial influences. Maybe, and then at some point, in one of the choruses, when people are speculating about his genesis and about his roots, the suggestion is made that his mother might have been one of the gods, and that she bore him by a peasant. And so, I mean, his relationship with religion changes during the course of the play, and at the front end, I think it's confrontational. It's a heroic hero, a human, who seems to be able to do supernatural works to improve the living standards and the safety of the people of Corinth, and then he gradually slides into a different relationship where he's needful of support and help from the gods, and eventually, of course, he's undone completely. When he finally, I think he acknowledges and accepts his responsibility, but on the way, he's certainly looking for help. So I think there's a change over the course of the play. Adamant rationalism, if you will, and heroic humanism to something a little more theocratic and a little more subordinate.
But toward the end, when the original culprits come forth, who had dealt with this child up in the mountains, and then really helped to arrange for adoption, Oedipus is blaming those guys. He's not accepting responsibility.
Someone referenced earlier the hubris, the arrogance that dominates the first part of the play. How he, to your point that he, whether self-promotion or otherwise, he takes advantage of. He falls into the way that because he gets rid of the Sphinx in that situation, and falls into replacing his father, and into that position, and it becomes by divine right that he gets that, or divine order he gets that. And then as it goes further down, that arrogance, the way it collapses at the end, it's rather dramatic. It's more than a little bit dramatic. Great story. Thank you for bringing it to us.
So there are several more plays in which plays of geez, my mind is
No, let me interrupt you, Ron.
Sure, I'm
But we
sorry.
don't want to go there because
Okay.
we want to stick with this one.
All right.
I think the shepherd that put the baby in the tree is to blame for something. He knew something and he let this happen. So I don't blame Oedipus for being mad at him. I think that they did. They, if they had only not done that, the whole story would have been, he was trying to escape what he knew was his fate, and he couldn't.
Yep.
He couldn't.
What I wonder is if you look up the word irony in the dictionary, this play's got to be part of that definition. I mean, the irony of it all is, I mean, and that's what makes it, I think, such an enticing story. I was really involved in reading and watching it, and I hadn't thought I would be, but I think kudos to Sophocles.
Yeah.
What role does the chorus play?
Yeah. That's fascinating because the chorus also shifts its position on critical issues as the play progresses, and initially I think they are aligned with Oedipus and prepared to celebrate his great competencies and his achievements, and they're looking to him for salvation, and they're looking for him to lead them out of the desperation and despair that they're feeling, and in the process they're almost praying to him, they're celebrating him, and then as things progress, I think at least in the middle, the chorus becomes a kind of jury. It observes and it judges. And it begins to make moral sense in the context of Greek religion and values of the time of what's transpiring on the stage. And then at the end, I think the chorus assumes still another function, which is pronouncing the desperation and despair that Oedipus and everyone else involved are feeling, and they are the agent for this catharsis to take voice and to be cried out. And so I think Sophocles has used his chorus in a very artful way, and I think that's another one of the distinctive merits of this play. It's great stuff.
Yes, Mike.
Forrest, I have a question for you. So, although I took Descartes and Aristotle from you back in college, I admit this is the first Greek play that I've read. And so, the chorus, if you go to Rogers and Hammerstein or Gilbert and Sullivan, the chorus kind of sings and it maybe sums up the action or whatever. But obviously the chorus, which is derived from the Greek plays, had a very different view, as Ron said. They're supporting summation. It's the CNN/Fox News of the time or something, giving you an overview. So, I mean, what is your experience? In the Greek plays, what was the purpose of the chorus, not just in this play but other plays?
Well, it really varies. It doesn't have the same role all the time. So sometimes they seem to be ignorant fools who are very slow. I mean, in this play, they're very, very slow to come around to understand. They kind of are willing to defend Oedipus until really quite late. Not I think, I would argue not in the middle of the play, but really toward the end. They are swung around. So, but I think that the chorus does different things depending upon the playwright.
Okay. Thanks.
I thought the chorus. Oh, go ahead.
Donahue?
Part of what I got was also from the translator's notes. that when she talks about the chorus and how important the translator is in this, that she tried to translate it in a way that there was a reference almost musical. I was trying to listen to the rhythms of the words as well, whereas when I read when I had to wait a couple of days to be able to get the Wilson translation. I got one of the commonly available translations online.
Right.
It didn't sing, to put it mildly. It didn't sing when I was doing that. So I thought the quality of the translator there's always something I admire when I think it makes something very evident to me, because I don't speak Greek and I have no sense of it. She did a nice job. Miss Wilson did a very nice job, I thought, of rendering it in a way that I could almost hear the music when the chorus was speaking.
Yeah, I must say, if down the road, if you haven't encountered Emily Wilson's translations of the Odyssey and the Iliad, she did the Odyssey first and then the Iliad. All the previous translations, including by well-known people like Fagles, and before that, Latimer and Fitzgerald, she is much more fluid in her translation. Her translations just flow like you're reading a novel, a long novel. And she's been widely praised for that sort of excellence.
So one word jumped out to me, of course, as an environmental scientist. She used the word pollution a couple of times, like, the plague and pollution. And I looked up the Latin derivation, and it's soiled. And even soiled in those contexts didn't make sense. And so the word lost in translation, whatever the original Greek word was, I'm not sure pollution captured it. At least in my mind, it raised a question mark.
Yeah.
I thought the chorus sort of set the tone and gave the atmosphere, sort of like in movies when the music pipes up and that certain sounds of music are going to change, mean something. So I thought it. So that's what I heard in the chorus.
I think that comment about pollution was a very insightful one and a valuable one. I think one of the roles that the chorus played here was to make the failed acts of individuals into something that was socially significant and had a bigger culture-wide impact and consequence. So they weren't just commenting, but they were demonstrating. And I'm sorry, please go ahead. Please, I run on. I apologize.
Oh no, that's okay.
I think this mechanism was significant, and I think that translation added additional gravity and additional significance to what was transpiring. This wasn't an individual tragedy. This wasn't the kind of tragedy that that, as I recall, Pluto was so opposed to in the Republic. This was this failure to understand and overcome a person's fate was a social failure or had social consequences.
I wonder. I think that the hard question for me is not so much what Oedipus's view is or Jocasta. I mean, she says it's all chance,
Right.
and the chorus has its own view. But I wonder, where does Sophocles stand on that issue of being responsible, having choice, making choices, or having your life kind of foretold to you. You know, these days, there are people in philosophy and in neuroscience, so on, who argue that we are what we are because of our genes, and we don't have any choice about that. And our genes, and then some people say also our family and our mother and father and how they treat us and so on. All those things go into our life and make us what we are, including the choices that we make. Well, what do you think Sophocles himself think? What does this writer of this play think? He puts various beliefs into various people's mouths, but where does he stand?
Well, I think just by making Oedipus the tragic figure that he made him, he may well think that one is more in control of their lives than the chorus and or some of the characters in his play state. And if I can say about the chorus, my sense of the chorus, it reminded me of when Howard Cosell used to call Monday Night Football. And when one team was doing well, it was all that team. Yes, sir, that team's a great team. And then the second half came, they were doing terribly, and the other team was on top. And that's what Cosell called for the rest of that game. So I didn't get a lot out of what the chorus was saying. It just seemed to be following the core action to me.
Mhm.
When the chorus, and thanks to Lance for, I think it was Lance sending out that video of the play from Stratford. I had read about in the play and in Emily Wilson's discussions, they talked about the actors were always wearing masks. And I thought about when you, and that made it obviously visual to me, that what the masks were. You get no facial expressions when the masks are on. So I ended up saying that it just brought it home to me that you're listening to the words, that when people were listening to it 2,500 years ago and watching people do it, they weren't reading it, they were watching it on the stage. It was the inflection of the voice. There was no other signal, if you would, that we would see on a play where you would watch the facial features or in a movie that we would be used to right now, that would denote some of the changes and the attitudes people had. I thought that was fascinating. Lance, thanks for sending that along too.
My pleasure.
Yeah, there was a variety of the masks though in that performance. They weren't all the same.
Yeah, that was good.
And Emily Wilson suggests, if I remember correctly, that Oedipus would have reappeared after he's taken his eyes out with the hairpins. That the mask would have changed, but that's a guess by her because we don't know. We don't have any information about that, but it does make a kind of sense, I think. But I thought it was interesting that I'd always thought of the masks as being all the same, but in that production there is quite a variety.
And
Now,
the color of the
that said, they don't change. You know, that person has that particular facial expression all the way through.
Do we know how the original production was? Were the masks all the same in ancient Greece?
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know. Gee.
We know that they had masks, but we don't know.
Yeah. Gee.
Do we know how this play was received in Athens when they had these
Oh yes,
competitions?
we do know that. I mean, Emily Wilson talks about that, about how he won the first prize for this play again and again. He won prizes for. He was kind of held up to be one of the really greats, and oddly enough, I didn't know, had not encountered this before, but he seems to have been a real nice guy.
Yeah, that's what he says. What she said.
Very
I
honored.
think the dude he kept losing to was Aeschylus when he lost. So I guess that's not so bad, really.
Yeah, right. Yeah, although he beat Aeschylus too.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So where does Sophocles stand on these issues about our responsibility for our lives? Or is he just fiddling around with the ideas?
I took it more from the narrative, just that I read it for the story, not for the substance behind the story, if you would, Forrest. So when you raise a question like that, I have to think and reflect about it for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
I think if Oedipus was in control of his life, and his failure to control his life by controlling his anger and his other actions resulted in some horrible things to him. If Sophocles wrote it that way, I could have to guess that Sophocles is trying to make an example for someone that, get yourself under control, do what's right, and you'll be okay. That's the way I'd like to look at it.
I think he believed in fate in many ways. I don't know. I think he kind of believe if this is a story and you tried to his story and you try to figure out what he believes, I think he might believe more in fate.
Yeah, I felt Sophocles did not give a free will much of a chance in this story.
Yep.
And as I said, I think it's hard to just say absolutely he believes in the fate and there's no free will, because there is some confusion there. And I felt the confusion about the praying, because you pray to change things, and the people were praying, and that was kind of a flip view of the fact that poor Oedipus was told this story a long, long time ago, that what was going to happen to him, and he couldn't avoid it. So I think Sophocles was leaning more towards the fates or gods or controlling things than giving Oedipus an opportunity to get out of this mess himself.
Let me refer you back to the chorus on page 41 of our translation. The chorus says, may fate be with me. All my words, all my deeds are holy and reverent. Good actions are governed by laws whose feet step high, who are born in the heavens above, and Olympus alone is their father. That sounds like it's all dictated by the gods. But then in the very next collection of lines, arrogance fathers sovereignty. Now this is the same chorus. Arrogance, if filled too full of too much against what's right and good, attains the highest courtesies and then topples down headlong to necessity, where it can find no footing. So it sounds in that part, if you get too big in your boots, a downfall is going to come. And that sounds like it's your own responsibility. But the lines just before that make it sound as if it's all fate. So the chorus is a bit wishy-washy, aren't they?
So,
Well, they're making you think.
But they're not thinking themselves.
but I mean, Oedipus had just egregious flaw. And there's a wagon, it's impeding his way, and he kills 5 people. I mean, there's no sense of proportion there. And so to that extent, he brought about his own downfall. and it could have been prevented. I don't know how the Greeks felt about murder.
No, murder is a bad thing unless it's on the battlefield.
Well, or unless it's a baby, but
Yeah,
How about that? Yeah.
yeah.
Road rage doesn't count. No exemption for road rage.
yeah, road rage. That's right.
There might have been a couple more murders too if Oedipus hadn't been restrained by his wife. She intervened both in the
Yeah.
interest of her brother and also in the interest of the sage, where again it was Oedipus's anger and his determination only to hear his own story of history that propelled him to take some really aggressive and murderous action, and but he was backed down by her intervention, by her application of common sense and rationality. That was another ironic transposition, because at the beginning of the play, I thought he was the rational agent and she was the more spiritual agent. And I think their alignments crossed over and created another ironic shift. Lots of those in the play.
And going back to what Lance said, Severin Darden says in the lecture, if you got to hear that, why didn't Oedipus, when he solved the riddle of the Sphinx, and they said, okay, you got to marry the queen, and he might have said, she looks old enough to be my mother. Pretty good.
Someone,
if he was so worried about
Yeah,
what he supposedly was fated by Apollo, he could have stayed a bachelor all his life, or he certainly wouldn't have
Forrest,
married an older woman.
I would be careful pursuing that course, because I did happen to mention while I was watching the play to my wife, he really shouldn't have married an older woman. And
Yeah.
my wife seemed to take great umbrage at that. So I think you got to be careful with that.
certain insights have to be restrained and restricted to this small
Yeah,
circle.
no
Be
doubt.
careful.
In the copy that we've got, the translation, and I assume most people got the one there, that I got to the end of the story, and then I started reading a few of the criticisms afterwards that were involved in it. And I found them, one in particular is striking me right now, is that there were multiple people telling that story. That it wasn't just the first time in that stuff out there. And in one of the other recounts, and I don't remember who it was from, said that there's a lot more detail about the murder of Laios, and more detail on what Laios did to anger Oedipus, whatever how the phrasing is. It struck just in this discussion. It says there's multiple myths out there that we're dealing with. This is but one that was celebrated for the quality of the writing, apparently, but multiple people recounting the same story with different details. That's another thing that would get me to drive more deeply into the book.
Interesting.
It seems that for the writers in ancient Greece, there were these stories about different people circulating, and then they could take these characters and do their own thing with them, make their own plot. And I mean, there would be certain essentials that they would have to maintain to be true to some part of the myth, but they could play a lot of different roles there.
I mean, one of the treasure chests of these available myths and historic insights had to do with the gods themselves. They were highly specialized, right, in terms of the domains for which they had full responsibility. Dionysius over the harvest and over wine drinking, etc. Apollo, he was the king of truth, right? He was the truth giver. And
Yeah.
there were other references to other minor god figures in the play. What do you make of the fact that Apollo was the god that Sophocles drafted into this play? What does that tell us about Sophocles' own idea of who manages the world and what the furniture is that we're all damned to use, either our own wits or something higher level? Zeus is the big god, right? He's in control of everything.
He was the Roman, wasn't
I'm
he?
sorry, please.
I was
Well,
going to
he's not
say,
in,
Why
he's
Apollo
not
here?
in control of everything. In the check me on this, Mike Donahue. Hera is able to take charge of Zeus in certain circumstances.
That's
Isn't
what it
she?
was. That's what it was in the Iliad. She manipulates Zeus at
Yeah,
times and angers Zeus when she rejects something in direct opposition to what he had ordered at that point. So she's another. And Forrest, I'm getting way over my head on this understanding of Greek mythology. So somebody else
Yeah.
jump into it if you would. That's just from reading the Iliad recently.
And Forrest, wasn't there intermarriage between the gods and the humans?
Oh yeah.
oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So I guess the
And-
modern view would have to be that was okay, right?
Sure.
Sure, they
Okay.
had offspring. They had babies.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Europa was the daughter
Well,
of Zeus, right?
it's true of Christianity, isn't it?
Mhm.
In some versions, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. The core.
The core. Yeah.
We do. Good stuff.
Forrest, have you ever come across any kind of modern plays that use the Oedipus theme? I mean, certainly there have been plays of just nature versus nurture and fates,
Yes.
going back all through literature. But I'm just trying to think of there's no modern analogy to this.
No, in fact, I was one of the questions that I was thinking about was how would you write a modern play about an Oedipus-like figure? I think that if you take away the Greek culture of that period, it's very hard to imagine the same story being told.
Mhm.
As opposed to Lysistrata. Hi, Richard. Richard Neyman has joined us for our class here. You want to say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
Lysistrata Jones and her basketball team, a musical is made of that. And so I suppose it can be done with some stories, but with Medea, well, they could make an opera of her, but we don't have some modern equivalents.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to do that.
The Coen brothers in their movies for a while with Brother Where Art Thou, they kept on saying it was a retelling of the Iliad. And I just, after the third or fourth time, I figured they were just teasing us in that category. They were just
Yeah.
responding to a question, but there was one more in there. And I noticed that Lance, in the version you sent around, it said it was the beginning and the title was William Butler Yeats. Something about Yeats, as to whether it was a recounting or how he staged it or
On the
something.
translation, I think.
Yeah, it was Yeats.
That I frankly didn't notice.
That I thought was pretty fascinating too.
But the Stratford Festival Theatre, if you've never been, is a wonderful theater in Ontario that does remarkable Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And when we've used to travel and still do to Niagara on the Lake, that has a Shaw Festival. every year that I think a lot of the guys here, women, would love to go to. If you haven't done that, it's a beautiful area and but I was surprised to see when I finally looked at it that it was done in 1957.
Yeah, yeah,
That's almost ancient.
yeah.
The Yeats line I go back to is, I hope I quoted it correctly, is that being Irish, he had an abiding sense of tragedy, which sustained him through temporary periods of joy. That's just in this category.
Good
That's
one.
great. That's great.
Are there other performances of Oedipus Tyrannus that are recommended and are available?
I don't know of anything more there.
There was another one I found on YouTube.
Yeah, okay.
That was done, I think it was an English theater group without the masks.
Okay.
And so that was, in a way, it was clearer because the speech was more articulate.
Mhm.
There was,
And-
in fact, I kept
Go ahead.
when I found Lance's play, mine kept jumping to another performance by University of California, Irvine, a more modern one, a more contemporary one. I think it said it's been up for 9 years or something like that. So
Thank you.
I did not watch that.
There you go.
I'll note that Forrest took issue with the subtitles because they kept making crayon.
Yes.
I kind of enjoyed it that way,
That was hilarious.
but each to their own, I guess.
Rather, distracting caption.
I was very surprised that they hadn't gone back and edited that.
Yeah,
That was good.
you can't rely on YouTube.
No.
So
I-
Richard, why don't you jump in here and give some of your thoughts while you're
My
late? Yeah,
random thoughts.
yeah. We wrestled a lot with how much are the gods in control? How much is it a matter of Oedipus and his temperament and the choices that he makes? And surely you did some thinking about that.
Well, yes, I guess I did. When I read some of the Greek tragedies in college, much was made, and Emily Wilson refers to this of the tragic flaw. Did you talk about that today?
No,
I
we
don't
didn't
want
do
to get
that.
into that.
No.
And she dismisses that. At least 50 years ago, I think a lot of theorists would say that an essential element of Greek drama was that the hero has a tragic flaw, which takes him from a high place to a low place, and I guess him or her. Now, I don't remember all of the embroidery around that idea, but I did note that Emily Wilson just dismisses it and says that that's not accurate because there's nothing. Sophocles isn't saying that there's something evil in this man, or that this is of his own doing. And she makes that point, I guess, by quoting the later play that he did about Oedipus.
Yeah, Oedipus at Colonus.
Yeah, where Oedipus says, "Hey, it's not my fault. Things just happened," and evidently Sophocles is sort of endorsing that view. But it did make me stop and wonder whether there isn't some mileage in that idea of a tragic flaw. One of the things that seems to get glossed over in all of this is that what set off this chain of events was, an attempted murder by the parents of Oedipus, and then later an actual murder by Oedipus of the man who turns out to be his father. And he always feels justified in that, in what he did. In fact, he doesn't seem to have lost any sleep over it. But it seems to have been an impetuous act. She calls it road rage, and it ends up with him killing all of these people who, I don't know what, denied him access to the highway or something. I think you could make a case that there's a bit of a flaw in this man's character, that he acts in this without thinking, rather imperiously, and in fact we see him doing that more than through much of the play, just ordering people around and jumping to conclusions about Creon and others. Jumping to conclusions. He doesn't seem to me to be a particularly deliberative figure in this play. He seems like a man who is rather full of himself and rather self-confident, but also very, I'm sure there's a better word than impetuous, a heavier word than impetuous. But headstrong, yeah. And that maybe that is a kind of tragic flaw that helps to trigger this tragedy. That's just something that occurred to me. I don't know whether it's worth pursuing. No. But I've come a long way to say that, and I'm glad I got it out. I've spent a lot of time at Heathrow Airport today wondering if I'd have the opportunity.
It still sounds good back here in the colonies. Thank you.
Minding the gap.
Minding the gap.
Okay, well, I think that we've kind of run our course in this discussion. For next time, we're going to have a totally different kind of play, a real comedy, and indeed a very coarse comedy.
Yes.
But as I said, I think in my note, when you're reading this version that I've chosen, when you're reading this translation, don't look at all the notes at the bottom. It will just slow you down, and you'll lose the humor of it, and you'll lose the rhythm of reading it too. So just forget about the notes, but do read her essays. She's got some very insightful essays about the role of women in ancient Greece and the way there are some who have some privilege, but it's always very limited. And women are not given high respect, except for being, as Oedipus says, being there to be plowed. Very coarse view of women in that
Sounds
period.
about right.
Yeah. So I'll send you some links for doing the musical, and I think there is maybe something else that would be kind of fun to do with respect to Lysistrata, but it's going to be quite a different thing. Mike Donahue?
Yeah, can I ask Lee what he thinks of his brother's work today?
Brilliant as always. He's really super good. And
I say below. I was below par.
That's what you want to be, below par.
Yeah, I was.
Also the
I was,
fact
This is the golfer speaking.
that
I was
some
a
have
bogey.
returned for a second or third or fourth or fifth.
Say that.
visit.
Speak louder, Lee.
Yeah. Yeah. It's impressive that so many of you have come back for another treatment or two from him. It testifies to his great skill in leading discussion and honoring your views.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel very
Here, here.
privileged. Better students nowadays, I think, Mike Roman, don't you think, than in your day way back then?
Oh, yes.
As far as I could remember, yes.
Okay, well, let's sign off and we'll stay in touch. And if you have questions or comments you want to make in the meantime, that's why I have furnished all of you our email so that you can write to particular people if you like. And I've taken it for granted that you don't mind my sharing that with all of you. And that if you want to direct anything to me, do so as well. So we'll see you next week when I think we'll come up with something that will be a lot of fun and not quite so seriously pondering the great issues.
You take care.
Thank you,
Okay.
Forrest.
Thank you.
care,
Thank you,
everyone.
Forrest.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.